How would you describe yourself? Are you a hard worker? Maybe a bit of a worrier? Or just helpful? We usually think of these as just simple little personality quirks. But what if they were more than that? What if the exact words you pick could actually give us a clue about how long you're going to live?
Yeah, I know. It sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But some fascinating new research is showing that this connection is very, very real. The way you describe your own personality, it isn't just a snapshot of who you are today. It might just be a surprisingly powerful predictor of your future health and, yes, your longevity. So let's get into the science behind the words that define us.
Okay, so for decades, scientists have been studying how our personalities affect our lives. And they've usually done it by looking at the big picture, using these really broad categories to sort us all into types. But it turns out the real story isn't in the big picture at all. It's kind of hidden in the fine print.
You've probably heard of the Big Five personality traits, right? It's been the gold standard in psychology for a long time. These traits are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And look, they're useful labels, for sure, but they're also super general. They give us the chapter heading, but they don't really give us the specific details of the story.
And that is exactly where things start to get really interesting. A new study decided to zoom right past these big categories. Researchers started asking, what if we stop looking at the general trait of, say, conscientiousness, and instead we look at the specific words people use, like organized or thorough?
And we're not talking about some small-scale experiment here. A team from the University of Edinburgh and the University of Limerick dug into data from over 22,000 adults. Some of these folks were followed for as long as 28 years. So, yeah, this is the real deal. Robust science, published in the Journal of Psychosomatic Research. This right here, this really shows you that shift in thinking. Over on the left, you've got the old way, these broad traits like conscientiousness. But on the right, that's the new approach. Instead of one big bucket, they looked at the specific ingredients inside. Are you hardworking, thorough, active, lively? They realized that two people who are both extroverts could actually be completely different.
So what happened when they zoomed in on these little nuances? Well, they discovered that these specific individual words were actually better at predicting mortality risk than the big, broad categories they belonged to. The fine print, it turns out, was way more important than the headline.
The study's co-author René Mutis put it perfectly. He said, it's these nuanced differences that matter, possibly even for how long we live. So it's not just that you're conscientious, it's how you're conscientious that holds all the predictive power. Now, out of all the words and all the traits the researchers analyzed, one just stood out from the pack. It was the single most powerful predictor of a longer life, and it's all wrapped up in this one number, -21%.
So what was the word? It was active. People who described themselves as active had a stunning 21% lower risk of dying during the study period. And get this was after the researchers accounted for other big factors like age, gender, and even existing medical conditions. That is a huge, huge finding.
Active and lively were right there at the top of the list for longevity, but other words were close behind. Being organized, thorough, responsible, hardworking, and helpful, they were all linked to a longer life. Now, on the flip side, traits that we associate with neuroticism, being moody, anxious, or easily upset, well, those were linked to a shorter one.
Okay, so we know what words are linked to a longer life, but why? I mean, how can a simple self-description connect to something as complex as our entire lifespan? Well, the researchers proposed a few key pathways that connect our words to our well-being.
First off, these words can drive our behavior. It makes sense, right? If you see yourself as organized, you're probably way better at sticking to a medication schedule or a workout routine. Second, these traits might actually reflect a deeper underlying psychological resilience. And third, and this is really important, the connection isn't just about lifestyle. The link was still there even after they controlled for things like smoking or BMI.
And that brings us to a really key idea here, psychological resilience. It's basically your ability to bounce back from stress and tough times. So when you describe yourself as responsible or hardworking, it might not just be about your work ethic. It could be a sign that you have the mental toughness to navigate life's challenges, which has this profound effect on your physical health. So what do we actually do with this information? This isn't just some interesting academic exercise. This research could have some pretty radical implications for the future of medicine and public health.
As co-author Park O'Sullivan pointed out,
Personality could play a crucial supporting role that's been seriously underestimated in medicine. Think about it. We track blood pressure and cholesterol, so why aren't we paying attention to the behavioral patterns that can impact our health just as much?
I mean, just imagine a future where a quick personality screening could help your doctor. It could flag people who might be at a higher risk. For example, somebody who doesn't see themselves as organized might need a little extra help sticking to their prescriptions. Or someone who doesn't feel active might need more targeted support to get moving. This is like a whole new frontier in personalized medicine.
But, and this is super important to remember, the authors stress that this is not destiny. You are not doomed by your personality. These are correlations. They are not a life sentence. Your self-perception does not seal your fate.
And that really brings us to the most important takeaway of all. If personality isn't destiny, then our actions are what matter most. So instead of worrying about the labels, think about the behaviors. What's one small action, one specific thing you could do this week to be a little more active or a bit more organized? You don't have to change who you are, but you can always choose what you do.